Thanks, Bruna. Greetings, everyone. Lovely to see all of you here, and thank you for joining us in your morning, your afternoon, and evening time. On behalf of AMY, the Alliance to Improve Midwifery Education, we welcome you to the fourth of these webinars, where we examine the WHO Framework for Action, the 7 Steps to Strengthen Quality Midwifery Education. Today's webinar, Step 4, focuses on preparing educational institutions, practice settings, and clinical mentors. And I'm really sorry, Bruna, I've just realised I've talked over the translation slide.
Welcome to your meeting with ICM. The interpretation button should appear at the bottom of your screen, next to the Share Screen button. By clicking on the interpretation button, you can choose the language you would like to hear. The interpretation button will then transform this meeting into the selected language. To change the language you would like to hear again, follow the previous procedure by clicking on that same button. By default, you will hear the selected language at 80% volume and the original audio at 20% volume. If you would like to mute or unmute the original audio, click on the corresponding option within the language button. Enjoy your meeting. Bienvenue à votre réunion avec l'ICM. Comme la réunion propose une interprétation simultanée en français, le bouton Interprétation devrait apparaître en bas de votre écran à côté du bouton Partager l'écran. En cliquant sur le bouton Interprétation, vous pouvez choisir la langue que vous souhaitez entendre. Le bouton Interprétation se transforme alors en la langue sélectionnée. Pour changer à nouveau la langue que vous souhaitez entendre, suivez la procédure précédente en cliquant sur le même bouton. Par défaut, vous entendrez la langue sélectionnée à 80% de volume et l'audio original à 20% de volume. Si vous souhaitez couper ou supprimer l'audio original, cliquez sur l'option correspondante dans le bouton de la langue. Bonne réunion. Bienvenido a su reunión de la ICM. Como la reunión ofrece interpretación simultánea en español, el botón Interpretación debería aparecer en la parte inferior de su pantalla, junto al botón Compartir pantalla. Haciendo clic en el botón Interpretación, puede elegir el idioma que desea escuchar. El botón Interpretación cambia entonces al idioma seleccionado. Para volver a cambiar el idioma que desea escuchar, siga el procedimiento anterior pulsando el mismo botón. Por defecto, oirás el idioma seleccionado en 80% de volumen y el audio original en 20%. Si quieres silenciar o desilenciar el audio original, haz clic en la opción correspondiente del botón de idioma. Disfruta de su reunión.
All right, sorry about that. I was so excited, I jumped in. So welcome to everyone. I hope you got that translation information. Welcome on behalf of AMY, the Alliance to Improve Midwifery Education, and welcome to Step 4 of this series, the Preparing Educational Institutions, Practice Settings, and Clinical Mentors. I'm Felicity Copeland, and I'll be moderating the session with my colleague, Tani Mazu, Technical Officer for Nursing and Midwifery at the WHO Regional Office for Southeast Asia. And our thanks go to Bruna Bimbato, who is hosting this platform from Brazil, to Shisato Masuda headquarters in UNFPA, and to our wonderful interpreters who are translating for our Spanish, French, and Arabic-speaking colleagues. So welcome to everyone. Thanks, Bruna. So rather than repeat the 7 steps as we have done in the previous webinars, we're going to move on and provide a very short recap of the last step, which was building public engagement and advocacy. And this step focused on the ways that midwives can engage with women and communities, the public and the government to champion for midwifery education and how to gain leverage at the ministerial level, remembering that if we are not at the table, we will certainly be on the menu. We heard from our colleague from ICM, the advocacy leader, Farida Laguerre, who defined advocacy according to 3 elements: the message you want to give, the audience you need to receive it, and the channel of strategies that you use to connect this message to your audience. And she argued that advocacy should be embedded in midwifery curricula so that students learn early how to raise their midwifery voices. And during this session, we learnt the phrase courage over comfort in order to push back against practices that are not women-centred. The next speaker, Suzanne Stahl, Director of Maternal and Newborn Health, Momentum Global Health, gave the background of a global initiative, Every Newborn Action Plan, and Ending Preventable Maternal Mortality, which presents midwives a very well-established framework in which to advocate for the mothers, babies, and communities they serve at the national and global level. And I really urge you to look at these frameworks. The impact in the countries who have implemented these strategies is really impressive. And throughout the webinar, we heard from many, many of you on the call describing the ways that you practice the art of advocacy in your everyday role of caring for women, families, colleagues, and students. It was really wonderful. That was so great to hear. So thank you for sharing these. And finally, we were reminded of advocating for ourselves and the importance of self-care. Just before I hand over to please remember to use the chat box. We really want to hear from you again, and also the question and answer platform that you can see on the bottom of your screen. And as we go through this step and talking about how we can prepare practice settings, how we can strengthen faculty and strengthen clinical mentoring, let's hear from you about what's worked. What are the things that you are doing to strengthen your faculty that have been successful? We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love for you to share them with everyone. So I'm going to hand over to my good friend and my colleague, who's going to give a brief overview of step 4. Thanks, Thanks, Bruna.
Thanks, Felicity. Can you believe we're already in the 4th webinar of the AMY webinar series? Now, today we're talking about step 4. So step 4 of the framework focuses on the capacity of the faculty to provide quality education, which includes the ways in which they support their students in the clinical practicums. This step provides guidance on how to prepare a teaching institution across the continuum, from the classroom and into the practice settings, because we know that's so important, with attention to the significance of having appropriate clinical supervision. It highlights the importance of having a robust and transparent connection between educators in the faculty with the clinical preceptors or mentors in the practice settings. This enables a clearer understanding how a student is progressing in their skills and behaviors really in the real world. Some guiding questions to accelerate assessing for a suitable environment for effective teaching and learning are articulated in Annex 2 of the framework, conducting a situational analysis of midwifery education. These include who provides education and what competencies do they have. In other words, are the educators adequately equipped to teach? Do the educators have ongoing professional development opportunities to support their ability to teach effectively? Are experienced clinical mentors or preceptors available to support students in the practice sites? So how do we ensure the students receive the best possible experience on their clinical placements, work and study? Are teaching environments safe and clean for work and study? This encompasses the concept of enabling environments, which has come up many times in this series of webinars. Now, before we start the discussions, I just want to start this session by canvassing the experience on the call now. Here are 3 poll questions for you to respond to in relation to some of the areas of this step. Question number 1. Have you ever been involved in preparing educational institutions for a formal review process? Yes, no, or I'm not sure. Number 2, have you worked closely with clinical mentors or preceptors? Again, we want you to answer yes, no, or I'm not sure. Number 3, are you or have you been a clinical mentor or preceptor? Yes, no, I'm not sure. So we're waiting for you to click on the answers so that we know who's in this webinar today. Hope you have the voting on your screen, and please click what's appropriate. So let's see who's on the call. We're going to give you a few more seconds to answer. Thank you. Farhat responds yes, yes, in Q1 and Q2. I could see in the chat, but we actually want to see the poll answers. Okay, so here we go. So we actually have a lot of us, 70% of us, who have been involved in preparing educational institutions for formal review process. Yay. And there are about 23% who haven't and 7% who's not sure. And this is why we're holding these webinars as well. For question number 2, 91% of us have worked with clinical mentors or preceptors, whether that's positive or negative experience, right? But we'll hear from some of the speakers today on how we can enhance that experience to make it positive. And then now for number 3, we have, are you or have you been a clinical mentor or preceptor? 84% of us have actually been clinical mentors or preceptors. And we have about 15% who have not been and 1% who's not sure. But this is great because we have a mix of group here, I would say, Felicity. What do you think?
Wow, I'm impressed. It's got a lot of experience on this call, but 91% closely work with mentors. I'm really keen to hear some feedback about this. What's worked and how do we strengthen that relationship between the clinical mentor and the faculty? So great.
So now I'd like to hand it over to you, Felicity, to introduce our first speaker. Over to you, Felicity.
Great, thank you. And it is my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, the very wonderfully experienced Sally Sakulku. And Sally is the Sexual and Reproductive Health Program Officer for UNFPA in Laos, PDR. And Sally, I know you've been on a workshop for the last few days, so we really appreciate you fronting up for some more talking. So thank you. So Sally, last year, actually, Bruna, thanks. Can we switch? Thank you. I've lost Sally.
Hello.
Oh, there you are at the end. Sorry, my screen's moving around. Sally, last year, a huge milestone for midwifery education in Laos, as Laos was the first Asian country to receive international accreditation of midwifery education. Congratulations. And we would love for you to start off by telling us a little bit about this process. How did that come to be?
Yes, thank you, Felicity. Thank you. Hello, colleagues. Yes, in fact, we have shared a little bit of this experience in our last meeting in Bangkok, one of the regional meetings. But I'm glad that you have asked us to also share again here. So basically, if I can start from the beginning, why Laos started to build the midwifery cadre. In fact, in 2005, maternal mortality ratio in Laos was very, very high. It was sitting at 442 per 100,000 live birth. And, and the government was trying to work towards achieving the MDG5 goal. And in order to do that, to accelerate the program, they had wanted support from UNFPA to build this midwifery cadre. So then a national assessment was conducted to see, whether it was possible to do that. And in 2009, the SBA program came into being. Now, with the race to achieve the MDG goal, the president had made a pledge at the UN Assembly that Laos would produce 1,500 midwives by 2015. So starting from 2009 to get to 2015 was not a long time. So the midwifery course that was started in the country at the time was just a short course, a 1-year post-basic program, where a low-level staff can be trained for 1 year to attain the mid-level. Then, within the first 2 years, we couldn't find any more existing staff to actually upgrade. So then, a 2-year direct entry came into being, where secondary students, can be trained for 2 years to become community midwives. And in 2014, the program was then evaluated. And then it was found that a 1 year or 2 year, 1 year post-basic and 2-year program was probably not sufficient to build a competent midwife cadre. So then the 2 programs was then stopped, and a 3-year high-level diploma course was then developed. So then since 2015, now everybody's on the same course. unless you are actually doing continuing education, then you do a 2-year, 18 months program. The country at the time, around 2014, also started having a degree course, a bachelor course that was supported by, you know, French organization. But a lot of the time it was, you know, they were using, the university were using external teachers. So, you know, bringing professors from abroad or using a lot of OBGY to do the training. It was a 4-year degree program, which only ran for about, you know, 4 batches. And then again, that was put on hold. And only now in existence is the continuing degree course, which if you've done your 3-year course, then you can do, you know, 24 months to actually top up and get a bachelor. We are still planning to work with the university to develop the 4-year course, bachelor. But again, you know, the country had wanted the basics to be right. So basically, let's work on the high-level diploma. Let's make sure that we have, you know, like watertight quality training so that we can train midwives who would come out competent and able to work. So that's how the whole thing came about. You know, with regards to the accreditation, do you want me to go on to talk about it?
Yeah, I'd love you to. I'm just amazed at the sort of creativeness that Lau has undergone, this sort of review process and pausing, reflecting, going, that's not working, yes, we'll do this. It's really impressive. And it seems now that you're really on track, obviously, being the first country in the ASEAN area. So we'd love to hear a little bit about the process of the accreditation that the ICM undertook with you.
Yes. So basically, you know, when following the SBA program, which was completed in 2012, and then the evaluation took place in 2014, and then a midwifery improvement plan was developed. And there, you know, the whole focus was in building faculty to make sure that teachers, trainers, you know, are able to teach, and that more and more midwife teachers are you know, have their capacity built, including the clinical preceptors. So all of these then we started to have fairly, you know, good teams of midwife teachers now at different schools. We were supported technically by Konkan University, the midwifery nursing faculty, who first, you know, had a group of people to be trained in Thailand, and then they would actually come, you know, on occasional basis, you know, twice a year kind of mission to work with each school. And with that, we started to look at, you know, with 9 schools across the country, it would be so difficult to make sure that, you know, each one achieved the kind of, you know, standards that we wanted to achieve. So then we did another round of assessment to see, okay, which school are the strongest that we could invest more to make sure that at least, you know, these ones achieve some international recognition. You know, partly because, I mean, if you talk to the teachers from the school, to the, you know, to the director of schools, you know, the part of the reason they would say is that because midwifery in Laos is so young, a young profession, there's not been immediate recognition, maybe, you know, by the colleagues, by the OBGY, by, you know, existing health staff that they actually work with. So I think with the aim of wanting to be recognized, to be, you know, to be able to say, yes, you know, we are young, but we have, you know, always, you know, reflect or, you know, maintain ourselves, you know, to the highest standard. So, you know, they were willing to be part of this assessment and to make sure that, you know, we somehow, or the school somehow, get recognition. And we were very lucky to have been introduced to an ICM accreditor. No, we can't call them accreditor. Someone who actually was part of the accreditation program at the time, from Canada, from Laurentian University. So who then took on the role of a mentor for the schools, and said, okay, if you aspire to get accredited by ICM, there are so many steps you need to work on. We need to actually work with you on, you know, where you're starting from, how you could get there, and then, you know, have a good plan on you know, being able to achieve, because at the time it would have costed to actually apply, you know, to become to have an accreditation would have costed, I don't know, in the region of $20-something thousand. So it would have been very expensive for the school to actually have embarked on it and then didn't get the accreditation. So we were thinking,
that's a big expense. So Sally, but you don't have 9 schools, you've got 3 now, is that right?
Yes, exactly. So after the assessment, then we narrowed down to few places that we needed to work on, to work with, and then you know, look at how we could do it. And then, you know, with this mentor who's been guiding us, you know, we heard about this ME program, where, you know, if we can get funding, you know, then the country or the schools would not have to pay anything, but being part of the program, and then can go on to be accredited. So that's how we came about with this, and then obviously, you know, all the preparation throughout, you know, for these 3 schools then started to happen.
And I think for those of us on the call who are not familiar with the MEAP accreditation process, it would be good for you to talk us through that, Sally. How was that for your 3 faculty?
Yes, it's a long process, and as I said, Laos embarked on it from 2018, and then we didn't have the actual accreditation or, you know, in-country assessment until late 2022, so late last year. But COVID has something to do with it. Obviously, it wasn't just that it was a long process, but I think with COVID, you know, we were a little bit delayed. But the process, you know, started with, you know, all the documentation. It was very much like, you know,
it's a lot. I've seen it.
And I warn other schools who want to embark on these things to really, you have to be committed. You really have to be committed. You have to have your team, you know, wanting to give their time. You know, because I mean, for Laos, it's double work, in a sense that a lot of the English document had to be translated into Lao, and the Lao schools, you know, will work with the Lao version, and then before it's actually sent back to ICM, it had to be back translated into English. So we had to do double work. And I'm not sure, you know, whether there will be other schools who are in similar situation where you would need to translate things back and forth. But we had to do, you know, it was heavy in that sense too. So it's not really, yes,
massive.
Yeah. So the work started, you know, early. A lot of documentation done, and then of course, you know, to bring all the schools, I mean, who are in separate places, right? Sin Kuang is up in the north, Luang Prabang is in the north, but in a different area, and then Jampasak right in the south. To be able to bring the 3 schools to work alongside each other, you know, we had to do several Zoom and meeting, and then to orient people, to talk to directors, to talk to different teams, to make sure that, you know, everybody's on board with the process. So then you know, then it goes into expression of interest, and then it had to go through self-assessment, which is the heaviest part. I think the self-assessment was how many? 89 documents, right?
Wow.
And there's so many annexes to this. So then we had to
And just to explain, like one of the big questions of the process is that they're looking at the sort of capacity of the faculty educators. Do they have enough qualifications? And that could be quite confronting and challenging for educators to go through that experience.
Yes.
It's impressive that you worked so well together.
Yes, no, because you know, with the ICM process is that, you know, they also needed the schools to have gone through the national QA process too. So, you know, for the schools that hadn't gone through that process, they had to then, you know, do that first. You have to have your national accreditation, you know, out of the way, and then you can apply for the ICM accreditation, you know, to be done. So all of those things are part of the preparation work. We had to run like about 3 different workshops with the 3 schools, you know, both online and face-to-face, and to prepare the documents. And what we used was the ICM Global Standard for Midwifery Education, the integrated core documents and position statement, and midwifery educators competency, curriculum mapping, what else? So these were the main list of work, and we also looked at some of the standards. So, but we because after the whole process was done, ICM also did the post-accreditation sort of evaluation with the schools. And I remember the schools were saying that, you know, if we had known what sort of standards they were looking for, that would have made life so much easier. So
yeah,
I think
interesting.
Yes. So
I'm just looking at this. You've got quite a few questions coming in,
okay.
Sally, and one of them I mean, this is so great. I mean, obviously an incredibly involved process, but also not only to prove that, but to do the work in itself is wonderful, because you do step up, don't you? So it's really you doing the work for your faculty. I've got a question here. Could a school use the standard, so I'm assuming use the MEAP template, and do its own quality improvement without a consultant? So you seem to rely very much on that consultant at the beginning.
She was our mentor. I mean, we didn't pay her or anything, but she helped. Right. She was willing to give her time for free to actually support the school to go through that. So which was great, because I mean, as a country office, as a, you know, program coordinator, even working with midwifery, you know, we were not familiar with all the ICM pieces. So it was good to have somebody who is linked to ICM and who's able to guide us through that. And it was really valuable. But I suppose if you can get your hands on all the tools that are available, which we didn't have, then yes, I'm sure the school can actually run through them, you know, yourself.
It's, as you say, it's quite a lengthy document. I had a look at it. And then, Sally, you had an in-country visit from ICM, didn't you? And was that the sort of the final step in the process?
Yes, that was a final step in the process. So it was a 2-day per school, because we had 3 being accredited at the same time. Again, lots of high-level meeting first. Basically, they wanted to meet with the department who controls the education piece. Well, I mean, you know, there was a courtesy visit with the health minister, the Health Professional Council, who governs all the licensing piece. So at you know, at the capital level, all these meetings, you know, were being done, and then for each school, a 2-day meeting, 2-day sort of like, you know, not just meeting but visiting, observing a number of things. So discussion with the students, you know, past and present, the managers, you know, lengthy meetings, interviews. So I think, what did they say? They had 32 meetings and 269 interviews.
Wow.
So you can imagine the whole process, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
having visit, the skills lab, library, or any materials, teaching materials, the dormitories, looking at the student
The environment, yeah.
Yes, yes. So all of those things, they were very, very thorough. We also went to district hospital, health centers to also talk to practicing midwives as well who had gone through the courses. Yes, very, very thorough. Heavy work with all the interpretation as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's exhausting. But what I can imagine, it was very quite exciting to work to come together to strengthen quality in midwifery education, and as you say, to get recognition as a new cadre in your country. And what a positive thing for your faculties to actually work towards those goals and to actually achieve them. So that's really a wonderful lesson. One of the comments in the chat was just about that qualification, that education standard of educators. And we know that the new updated ICM global standards for education are really clear that educators need to have, a higher degree level. So many countries with low resources are using their first and second year new graduates to come and teach. So that's very problematic. Sally, there's so much there. We would like to keep talking, but we need to speak to our next Jyoti, who's our next speaker. But just to finish it, what would you say was the top tip, or what would be the most beneficial thing that occurred for Lao during this process?
I think to have had that international recognition, for these schools who worked so hard, for it was really like, the key highlights. I mean, everybody still talk about it, but what I want to say is that the process doesn't stop here. It's not that once you get the accreditation, then you can just like, oh, okay, bye, we've got it, I think the process continues. I mean, there were 37 standards altogether that they were assessed on. They passed 33. There was a partial pass, three of them. And there was also one that was problematic. So they had to work through all of those things, and they will continue to work through those to make sure that standards remain. And you have to remember that accreditation is given only for 3 years. So there is there is a short lifespan. And if you at end of 3 years, and if you don't continue to work on your improvement, then obviously you might not actually get
reaccredited.
Reaccreditation. So you would have to continue to work on it. But I think one of the key things that maybe schools would have to be aware of is also make sure that your education, your program, it's part of the wider Ministry of Health program, strategy. At the end of the day, what you're trying to do is reducing maternal mortality. And if it's linked to all of those things, you're likely to get more funding, more support, and you need all of those things to be able to function to have somebody behind you. It shouldn't be the school running, on its own and trying to get accredited just, like a standalone thing. Everything is so linked, because you're also part of the facilities that you send your students to be trained. You're part of so many things within the whole health system. So make sure that it's all, there are hooks everywhere.
It's that alignment process, which is very much the 7 steps, isn't it? And aligning to the big picture of the national health strategy. That's fantastic. And I love that comment that standards remain. It's 3 years, so you've got to always keep working at it. There are so many comments here. Thank you for all that information. And to let you know, everyone, the MIAP template, or the reference for that, is in the I think Shisato has put it in the chat box, but we do have those references for you to look at. Thank you so much, Sally. And we'll probably have time to come back at the very end to answer some of those questions. But I will now hand over to my colleague Ai to introduce our final speaker, Jyoti.
Thanks, Felicity. Again, like you said, I think it was a great example of the 7-step framework. You had the leadership, you collected the data on MMR, and, the quality of the midwifery education, currently, and then advocating for making changes. And therefore you had this step on getting this national accreditation process. So congratulations, Lau PDR, for the great work that you've done. And now we have Ms. Jyoti Abraham. She's a senior lecturer at the School of Nursing, Faculty of Health Science at the National University of Samoa for the past 13 years. She is currently a doctoral student at the Victoria University of Wellington. And thanks so much to Ms. Jyoti for being up so late, because we know that it's almost midnight for you in Samoa. You're such a trooper. Thank you. So Jyoti, I want to ask you about your experience on how to prepare students and your institution for quality midwifery education. Can you explain how your university works with the hospitals, and how do the clinical placements work between hospital and teaching institution? How do you prepare students or even hospitals for clinical sites? Over to you, Jyoti.
Yeah, thank you, and Felicity. And also lovely to hear Sally about how to prepare our institution. I was really delighted to hear more about ICAM accreditation later on. Okay, thank you, I'm working at the National University of Samoa, and we know that it's a smaller education institution in the Pacific. And most of our students been in the 12-month program previously, and we just undergone an review for postgraduate diploma in midwifery, which now becomes 18 months ICM course. By preparing the students to go to the clinical sites, it's a very challenging one, since we only have very few qualified lecturers working in our university, and we only have a number of mentors helping us with the precepting. And we tried different, as Sally said, we also tried different type of courses, which means we did a block teaching method, and we also did a 14-week semester courses, so that we know which one works better with our students for quality education. So when the block teaching happens, how it works is 3 weeks of theory, and then we go for 4 weeks of clinical attachment. And in the 14-week one, we go for 2 days of theory and take the students to the clinical attachment for the rest of the 3 days in the week. So we tried both, and we felt like the block teaching was more better, or working well with students by continuity of care at the hospital, so that the students are with the clients more often. And so that really helped students to be more involved, and caring the mothers, and continuing cesarean mothers, and breastfeeding with the neonatal babies in the section. So that was really helping the way they're learning. They were very involved. And what we to prepare, we also do 4 weeks of practical labs in the university and we also invite our preceptors. Our preceptors or mentors are either retired nurses or midwives, retired midwives and part-time midwives, because full-time midwives are not allowed to come out of the hospital, because we have a very minimal number of midwives working in the clinical setting. We only have 117 midwives in the whole country, so you can understand that how many midwives are in a clinical roster whereby they need to be, and also they man the district hospitals in Samoa. So therefore we have limited numbers, and we can only pull out a couple of midwives who are part-timers as well as retired midwives. So they have a vast experience, more than 30 years of experience. And so we allow them to come into our clinical lab setting at the university and take them through the procedures with the students. So they are very aware of how the students do things, how educators teach them, so that they can work along with the students in the clinical lab, and they are more familiar with the preceptors when they are at the clinical site, which allows them to be very close relationship with them, so that they don't feel overwhelmed when they are going to see a different person in the looking after them in the clinical setting. So So as I said, the preceptors we pick as retired and part-timers, and we looked at their clinical skills as well as teaching skills, how they are working along with their personal attributes. Are they getting too much angry with the students? Or are they managing them carefully? So that we also look at them, and we give them a contract. So university allows them to be signed as a contractor, so they feel that they are compensated for the work they are doing. So which was really helping us to work with them, and they feel that they are a part of the university itself, so rather than working at the hospital and helping these students. And we also, after the midwifery review, as I just said, we went through the midwifery review. We plan to have the 2-day or 3-day workshop with the preceptors. So beginning of the semester, we will go through a full-fledged structured mentor or preceptor program workshop to allow them to take through teaching them how to look after them at the clinic, what are the role of the preceptor, how to look after their checklist and how to manage those. And we also allow them to take them through a debriefing, how to debrief or feedback the students, so that they're well aware of how they need to handle them in the clinic rather than just observing them in the clinical lab and going there. So this workshop we plan, which will help them through like a structural program, and also they will feel that we are working along with them, so that they feel part of the school and work with us. Rather than
thanks, Jyoti. I'm just going to stop you here for now, because I think you raised some really critical points that other countries are also experiencing. I know that in some countries there's some competition for clinical sites between medical, nursing, and midwifery students, and really it's not surprising to see 4 to 7 students or more carrying or looking after one woman. And it's so important that lab work then becomes very critical in strengthening clinical experiences. And you've talked about how you've utilized preceptors, but these are the retired midwives who have been in the system, who know the system, and you build a relationship with these students in the labs, so that when they go to clinical, they already have that relationship built and that they feel more comfortable. And I think you've touched on many issues like health workforce issues, the shortage issues that many countries are going through, as well as they transition to midwifery models of care. So thanks so much for sharing that. And I think it's just so important what you've raised and how you've utilized. But really, I want to also ask you, how do you overcome the disconnect between classroom teaching and actual practice, especially with the preceptors being retired midwives? Do you feel that there's some gap in the knowledge, or what is currently evidence-based and what's being practiced in real life? So this gap between teaching and actual practice that we all know that we face, but how do you work to overcome these?
So we actually have a mix of part-time midwives and the retiree midwife. Not all of them are retiree midwives, so therefore there's a mix and match. Like now the lecturers are there working, so we are going to the clinic one day. One lecturer who is currently teaching will go with one retiree midwife, and the next day the other lecturer will go with the part-time midwife. So therefore there is a theory which is done by the lecturers, and they are also observing them in the clinical along with the preceptors. So the preceptors seeing what we are teaching them in the clinical lab, as well as when they are going to the clinic, they are also there to support and overview them. So therefore, there is a mix and match, which really worked well with our, ensuring the quality of teaching is there and the practice is there. And as you said, we also have sometimes the student numbers posted in the clinic sites are really overwhelming, especially with childbearing students and reproductive health students and medical students are there. So therefore, the block teaching really worked well for us, because they are the clinical students for reproductive health and childbearing are usually going on a Friday a week, once a week, to the clinic. So therefore, this block teaching actually worked well, that our students are continuously there for a couple of weeks, and then they are off from the site so that the others can take over. So that's how we managed to allow the students to be with the clients, so that they are there for the 3 weeks or 4 weeks continuously. And the continuity of care was what we really learned. It is better for the practice of the midwifery students later on. And we also had so much challenges in the as I said before, the difference between the simulation practice and the hospital was really overwhelming for some of them. So they were sometimes scared of making mistakes with a real client, and some was resource implications, because the midwives in the department will say, oh, don't use too many gowns or too many gloves and things like that. So sometimes the shortage of resources itself was a challenge for some of our students. I'm not sure whether that's like that in other countries. Probably some are. And so also, as you mentioned earlier, retired midwives have a different set of a way they have practice. So that inconsistency between the theory and the practice is also a challenge. So we needed to make sure that we take them through the clinical labs before they come, so that they are practicing what we are teaching. And that was how we overcome with the situations. Sometimes they also were worried about the unprofessional behaviors. Some of the midwives do with the clients, and then they were not sure, or we are taught differently, but when we go to the clinical setting, we are seeing this, and how can we address that? The students themselves will come and tell us what's going on in the real clinical practice, and we needed to. So therefore, we also make sure as lecturers, we are attending perinatal meetings, which is every month. The midwives will, the doctors and midwives in the hospital will have a perinatal meeting to see what they have done wrong and how they can improve that. So it's the practice which is done at the Ministry of Health, and we have been invited to attend this. This is when we go, and what we have seen in the practice, what different needs to be done, or what improvement is needed. We just pass on that, and so that really working well with our relationship with the hospital midwives. Sharing our experience with the students as well as the preceptor.
And sorry, Jyoti, just so that we're all on the same page, because there may be some people that are not educators or involved in it yet. Can you explain to us what block teaching is? Because you mentioned it a lot, but just so that everybody understands what you're mentioning, if you can explain what block teaching is. And I know that we're short of time, so I'm just wondering if you have any last takeaway tips for other faculty members as well.
Thank you. The block teaching means we go for continuous Monday to Friday teaching of theory for 3 weeks. So in that one, we also take them to the clinical labs. So for example, one day for 3 hours of theory, and then we will take them to the clinical labs and take them through the practical sessions. Like that, we will do for 3 consecutive weeks. And after that, they are taken to the clinical practice. They'll go for 4 weeks, so that they are continuously from Monday to Friday, they are at the clinic with the preceptors. We never come to the university for any theory classes during that week. So continuously they are practicing at the clinical. So therefore they are seeing the same patients or clients in a daily basis for a couple of weeks in a row, and they understand the continuity of care, as well as they are seeing the same patient, helping the same clients. So they feel that they are doing something for their mothers, or doing something for their clients, helping their babies to breastfeed the babies, or continuity of or whether the premature baby is gaining weight, or yesterday was this much and now this baby has gained 200 grams, or things like this. That actually helps the midwives to engage in the work they are doing, and that will initiate, they will take their own initiative to learn more when they are there continuously. So that's very important to have. That's why I'm saying that I'm really happy for what we have learned from the block teaching, that really worked well with limited resource countries like Samoa.
Well, thanks so much,
Jyoti.
Jyoti, for explaining. I think there are a few questions to you in the chat, so I'm wondering if you can answer them on the chat, and I'd like to hand it over now to Felicity.
Okay, thank you so
Great.
much. I just wanted to, before we move on, I just
Yep.
wanted to smaller countries like us, we really rely on assistance from others. So what we have managed to continue our midwifery education here is get scholarship through WHO for our students, because our numbers are limited. Only up to 20 students are there in every batch, and we have managed to get the WHO to support our students, and UNFPA is helping us to equip with our curriculum reviews as well as this, simulation lab equipment. So this is some way they can also help their own country, to the education institutions, to help them to strengthen their midwifery. I mean, there are other ways where we can help our students to gain better or quality education, I guess. Yeah. Thank you.
Jyoti, that's such a passionate discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. And so lovely to hear of a small nation, 170 midwives. I think that's what you said. That's sort of, that's also, but what's lovely about that, I appreciate that your resource limited and you need more midwives for your country, but the fact that you can afford to give them that continuity of care experience in those blocks, and that you can afford to have that relationship. You must know them all personally very well. So that
Yes.
debriefing process, and as you say, the relationship with the clinical mentors, I mean, it's crucial. And I touched on hearing stories about students coming back where they've never even hardly put their hands on a baby because there's been so many students and overcrowding. Okay, there's lots and lots of questions, and a couple of questions coming through for you, Jyoti, around the retired midwives. Who pays for them? How do they remain updated? Are they private or public?
Okay.
There's quite a
They have to. Yes, the retired midwives, which are like 55 years and above, but they are still healthy. So they have to come up with the health medical checkup, and they have to come with apply for a registration, continuity of an annual practicing certificate, as well as they have a contract with the university. So therefore, they have paid hourly. How many hours they are working a week, that will be paid by the university. So we pay them. Yeah.
So you pay them.
Okay.
Yeah. And, I'd be interested to hear, I know we don't have a lot of time, but in the chat, how other faculty keep that connection with their clinical mentors, because at the beginning of this call, we had quite a lot of people on the poll who were clinical mentors who had worked very closely. And I think this is really crucial in sort of strengthening midwifery education, to have that connection. So anyone else in the chat who wants to share that? Can you see any questions? There's so many here. I don't know about night shift. Who stays? Do students stay overnight with clinical preceptors?
No, the preceptors only work day shift. So if there is a after hours clinical practice, they are usually done by the senior midwives or consultants. So they have midwifery consultants in the hospitals where they are the head managers. So they will be the one who looking after the students while they go for the afternoon shift. There are no night shifts allowed for the nurses here. Maybe because of not many people to supervise them. So therefore, they go for morning shift and afternoon shift.
All right,
so
I'm just reading.
Other questions?
Jyoti, I think there's a question between addressing the gap between obstetricians and midwives. I think this is something that a lot of other countries experience. So, how do you address the gap between the obstetricians and midwives? There's always some misunderstanding of decision making because midwives, in some countries are treated with little recognition. Do you have any comments, on that, please?
Yeah, I came from India, and I know that how we worked with the obstetricians in India and midwives. Where I worked in a super specialty hospital, but we were not allowed to continue with the care when the obstetrician is there. We need to hands off. But in Samoa, I can say that midwives do most of the job. And they only call the doctor or obstetrician when there is an issue. So if it's a high risk cases like cord prolapse or a previous cesarean and all those high risk cases, hypertension and all that, preeclamptic cases, those are the cases only looked after by the obstetrician, and we have to call them to come and deliver them. But otherwise, all the other normal cases with low risk mothers are all usually done by midwives, and the doctors are just observing them, but not coming, and it's all done by the midwives. Yeah.
Thank you,
hope that
Jyoti. Yeah, that's a good. I was going to ask Sally the same question, but there's another question that's come in from you, which I think is really, really pertinent. Sally, is there a noted reduction in your country's maternal mortality now that you have started the accreditation process and training processes and services? I think I represented that question.
I would say yes. Remember, I started off saying that in 2005, it was 442.
Yes.
And in the latest UN estimate for 2020, it's now down to 126. Now, we obviously cannot say that the attribution is all to midwifery. But when you look at the overall maternal health program in Laos, not a huge amount has changed. So, and the only thing that has been significant is the introduction of midwifery into the country. So I would say that it has actually made a difference. But of course, a lot of people will challenge me on this. We will probably need to do, some specific study to actually show that, midwives do contribute. But I'm not sure.
I think we have that data. Midwives make a significant contribution to reducing maternal mortality.
So
yes,
for
there
me,
you go.
Yes.
Yes. Bruna, thank you. I think we've got like 2 minutes left, it always goes so fast. We did have some latecomers that had some technical issues, and we had some wanting some recaps. We can't actually, I'm really sorry, recap now, but you can watch this webinar. We will send you the link to watch this webinar, so all will be well. You can catch up, and you can also, we will attempt to answer some of those chat questions and also circulate them, because there are some very stimulating questions. So the 3 sort of key points that we can take away from today was use existing resources for that accreditation process. What Lao went through was quite a long process, which is excellent, but there are also other accreditation processes that you can undertake yourself. And we've got quite a few of those in the chat for resources. And the other one, I think, is for faculty is to really, this didn't come up much in the chat, but this came up very much in reading around this step in the framework, is that the faculty really have to undertake a lot of professional development opportunities to continue their own educational standards, because as noted, some of them don't have enough higher education standards to teach, but they can undergo their own comprehensive professional development opportunities. And as Jyoti said really well, that to develop those pathways between faculty and clinicians is really key in aligning both those fields, clinical sites and theoretical sites. All right, I think that's it. Thanks, Bruna. Please come next time. We have 2 more really interesting speakers. In fact, we have 3 more next week when we look at strengthen faculty's standards and curricula. That's on September the 12th. I want to thank so much for coming in. I want to thank Sally and Jyoti, particularly you. You can go to bed now. Well done. And thanks, Bruna, and also to Chisato and to our wonderful interpreters. And thank you to all those comments in the chat. Be well, and we will be in touch soon. Thanks, Bruna.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
you.